Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya University and our Overcoming Chronic Pain curriculum. I am Andy Anderson, and my partner Ike Allen and I are the co-founders of Avaya. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya University and our Overcoming Chronic Pain curriculum. I am Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are the co-founders of Avaya, if you don't already know us. Thanks so much for joining us. In this next class, we are going to talk with fellow teacher Dr. Keesha Ewers. Dr. Keesha is an integrative medicine expert, doctor of sexology, psychotherapist, herbalist, and is also board certified in functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. She's going to talk about a very important topic. She's going to talk about healing trauma to heal pain. So a lot of different things are going to come up in this class with her. She talks about her really powerful story, her own personal story of overcoming her autoimmune disease, which was rheumatoid arthritis, right? She talks a lot about past traumas in her own life and how that led to her disease and how she was able to reverse that and get back to a very healthy life. So really, really powerful story and very vulnerable sharing that she did with us today. She also talks about something called the HURT study, which is healing unresolved trauma study, and ultimately dives into this topic of how unresolved trauma actually impacts our physical health. She talks about how this can lead to chronic pain and chronic illness. She also relates this back to the ACEs study that you might be familiar with. And she talks about a really surprising link between trauma, your brain, and your libido. So that is a very interesting component of this next class. And she talks about something that really blew me away, the really damaging effects of when we feel regularly overwhelmed. So this can actually also lead to chronic stress. It can lead to chronic pain, illness, all sorts of other damaging health effects. So just taking a look at, are you feeling overwhelmed regularly in your life, and what could you do about that if that is something that you're struggling with right now? So for now, our class with fellow teacher, Dr. Keesha Ewers. We hope you learn a lot from these insights and you apply them in your life and share them with your friends and family. Without further ado, here is Dr. Keesha. So Dr. Keesha, could you start us off by telling us, how did you come to do the work that you do today?
Sure. This is a really interesting story because I think a lot of people in the functional medicine world have similar, you're in the Western medical world until you get sick. And then when you run up against the brick wall of, no, we have nothing for you, then it's like the investigation that goes outside, which is how it happened for me, for sure. So I'm 54 now. When I was in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And it was this is the way my patients talk about it too, where all of a sudden they're sick. That's how I experienced it too, which is really inaccurate. It's, usually an autoimmune disease is taken anywhere from 10 to 30 years to develop. And so there's been this slow change and different imbalances that have occurred in the body that we are not taught to actually listen to the language of. And so it's like this big, all of a sudden event. And for me, I'd been training for a marathon. I ran a lot of marathons. And so one day I'm out running a lot of miles, and the next day I woke up and I was 10 pounds heavier with like just puffiness everywhere, all over my joints and my face, and just pain and exhaustion. I just felt like I'd been run over literally by a truck. And so I got up and got into a doctor and was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And when the family history part came out, she asked me if I had any history of autoimmunity in my family. I said, yeah, I think my grandfather had rheumatoid arthritis and in fact was wheelchair bound with it for a long time, died at age 53. I've already outlived him by a year with this. And she said, okay, well, here are two prescriptions, one for methotrexate, one for an a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Come back when you get worse, not if you get worse, and we'll up your meds, right? And I just said, well, hang on a second. I was an ICU nurse and I knew what the side effect profile of these meds were. I said, I'm actually really disciplined and I make my own food. I'll do whatever it takes for a lifestyle. What are some of those things? And she said, I'm sorry, it's genetic. You drew the short end of the genetic lotto. It's like, close the book, put it on the shelf, conversation finished. So on my way home, I just remember thinking there has to be a different way. And so I started my first investigation to the different way than what Western medicine offered. And so I did a deep dive. In those days, it was a dial-up modem, and it wasn't Google, it was Ask Jeeves. It was like, went in and started looking where we keep our medical research, PubMed and NCBI. And I found an article on yoga and autoimmunity. And I just remember, like, I was so conservative. I called up one of my running partners and said, going to a yoga class tomorrow. I've never hung out with people that chant. I'm really worried. Like, that's how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I got myself into a yoga class the next day, and he mentioned this word Ayurveda.
Mm-hmm.
And it was enough that it piqued my interest that I went home and got back on my computer. And what I discovered is that Ayurvedic medicine is the sister science of yoga. It's this 10,000-year-old framework of medicine that comes out of India. And one of the things that they said about autoimmune disease is that it's undigested anger. And that was really pivotal for me, because I remember at first reading that and going, I'm not an angry person, and just being a little bit pissy with the computer. And then thinking, oh, I really am not. Like, I am a consummate people pleaser. And I couldn't remember feeling anger, and so I thought there must be a problem with that. Like, this idea of digesting your emotions was so new to me. And then there was this other concept that Ayurveda talked about that really struck me. And that was that we're not just our physical structure. They call it your panchakoshas, that there are 5 layers to us. And that if you're toxic in any of those layers, your energy body, your emotional, your mental body, and even your spiritual, which Carl Jung called that spiritual layer, which in Ayurvedic medicine is called your Anandamaya kosha. That's the place where you feel joy all the time. That spiritual layer is the portal to Jungian psychology's idea of collective unconscious. And so, there's no new thought, right? All wisdom is contained there, and we don't get access to that all the time if we're toxic in these other layers. I remember really thinking about that and going, wow, that's amazing. I've never even heard of this before. And so I started learning how to meditate and really seeing what I could do to access this, because that's what I learned in this, this Google or Ask Jeeves search was like, oh, you have to learn to meditate to get this. And so I started learning to meditate, and one day I was meditating and this word autoimmune started dancing in front of my face, and I was swatting it away, like trying to have no thought, because when you're an early meditator, it's like this idea that no thought. And so I'm swatting this thing away. And then I finally went, oh, what is it that's trying to come in here? This word autoimmune. And I was looking at it and I thought, oh, that means I'm actually attacking me. And this is the first time I'd really sat with that for a minute. Like, auto, that's me going after me. When's the first time I wanted to die? Why do I want to die? Because I'm actually killing myself if I think about it. And so, I started going back in this meditation, and I call it following this little golden breadcrumb trail back into my past. And I was looking for, like, when's the first time that you can remember really wanting to exit this planet? And I found this 10-year-old little girl version of myself sitting in Key West, Florida on this balcony on a naval air station. My dad was in the Navy, under a palm tree and crying. And she was being sexually abused by the vice principal of the elementary school. And I wasn't able to actually tell anybody because I didn't have words. I would say, I don't want to go to school. I would cry. I'd have headaches and stomach aches, which was new for me. I never was like that. I loved school. And, I didn't have the word sex in my vocabulary at that age. It was 1975. I didn't have a television. I was a Navy brat. We moved all over the place. I didn't know the word abuse. I didn't know the word molestation. So the words I would use were things like, I'm afraid, to go to school. And so my mom didn't have enough to go on and sent me back to school. So this kid really wanted out and didn't really trust that adults were there to be, to take care of children, which was accurate for that experience, right? So I realized as I put this together and saw it that, oh, I wonder, I'll bet you that this real desire to exit has something to do with this disease I have today. And in this current reality of this 30-year-old body with 4 children and a happy life and a career I love, I don't want to die right now. So let's figure this out. And so I started doing trauma healing work around that event because I realized I'd never done it. It never even came up. Like, I didn't think about it. I had put it aside a long, long time ago. And that's actually what I now know at the age of 54 is not possible to keep that in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And it will come up and it will bite you, and we know this from science now. There are some big studies that show this. I just didn't have access to them at that time. So, by really doing that work and doing some other lifestyle changes and really understanding that I'm my own unique puzzle and learning how to solve that puzzle, I was able to reverse my rheumatoid arthritis within 6 months.
Wow.
And it hasn't been back. And I never took any medications. This is powerful stuff. Like what your mind does, your body mirrors. So that's how I got into it.
Thank you. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that and your vulnerability and trauma is something we talk about a lot at Avaya. We've had other events around it, like healing from childhood trauma not too long ago. And it's just crucial that we, be taking a look at our past, taking a look at what kinds of traumas we've experienced and how is that connected to what we're experiencing today. So specifically as it relates to chronic pain, what I know ACEs, obviously, most people who know anything about trauma know something about ACEs. So could you tell a little bit about what that is and how that might tie into people struggling with chronic pain?
Sure. So do you want me to give a little what the ACEs study is in case somebody has, okay. Yes. So I'll go through what the ACEs study is, and then I'm going to go with the, another study that I conducted called the Healing Unresolved Trauma Study that actually shows why we have the pain attached to the trauma. So ACEs study was conducted between 1995 and 1997 by Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control. It's the largest study of its kind that's ever been done. I mean, it's over 3,000 people in this study. And one of the things that they discovered was Kaiser had a weight loss clinic and people were successfully losing weight. It was a really good program. But what the director of the clinic started noticing is even though they were losing weight, there was a percentage of people that were dropping out. So luckily he was curious and decided to call people back in and find out what was going on for them, and found out that most of these people had been sexually abused in childhood. And so what he realized is that there was something to this. It was too large of a pattern to ignore. And so collaborated with the Centers for Disease Control and did this great big cohort study out of Kaiser Permanente. And what they were investigating were what they termed adverse childhood experiences. And what those are, they asked them, and this is how I classify this, is they asked the people in the study about capital T trauma. Okay, so big T trauma. And they were looking at 10 different kinds of neglect and abuse. The things that you usually hear about as trauma that we associate with trauma is like sexual abuse, domestic violence, psychological, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, and also watching a mother be abused or having a caregiver be incarcerated, mentally ill, addicted to a substance, or dead, or divorced. So these were abandonment, neglect, abuse issues on a capital T scale. And what they discovered is the higher your score, so below the age of 18, if you ticked one of those that you had experienced, you had an ACE score of 1. If you checked 2, 2, and so on. And the higher your ACE score, the higher your risk for all the chronic illnesses that we have in our culture today, including, unhealthy relationships, sexually transmitted illnesses, more sexual promiscuity, more sedentary lifestyle, addiction, plus autoimmunity, cancer, heart disease, and so on and so on. So what I thought when I was having, I opened up my practice and I started seeing all these women coming in, and I've given a TED talk about this. It's pretty interesting. It's called, "Have you heard from your libido lately?" And what I was looking at was women coming in saying they hadn't heard from their libido lately, and they wanted hormones. Like all of them would just immediately go to, "I would like to have bioidentical hormone replacement, please. I don't have libido." But when I started asking really easy questions, like, "Well, do you like your partner?" Tears. It seems like kind of a normal question you would ask. "So are you happy in your relationship?" Tears. "Well, when's the last time you had a libido level that you were happy with?" "Oh, I've never had one." Well, okay. So estrogen, testosterone, progesterone are not going to magically fix any of these issues, right? And so I started seeing this big correlation between hurt in the past and current day libido in women. Now, in Ayurvedic medicine, we have this term, it's called ojas. And ojas is this really lovely term for life force vitality. We actually don't have a correlative in Western science. And so I started thinking about this, like people were depleted in their ojas. I call it O juice, it's like their juice is gone. And libido level happened to me to become kind of like a indicator light on the dashboard of a car. And what I started seeing is that when it was low, people would just like have caffeine or an energy drink or eat carbohydrates or, like they didn't really listen to the fact that they were getting depleted. Whereas if you had an indicator light on the dashboard of your car that said your gas was at E, you wouldn't just keep pushing the gas pedal down. You would go find a filling station and take, put some fuel in the tank, right? And I thought, wow, we treat our cars so much better than we do ourselves. And when people are coming up, they're thinking I'm the filling station and they want hormones put in, but actually it's something wrong in the engine. Like this isn't the problem, right? And so I started thinking about it in that way and thinking, gosh, libido is a lot like a measurement, a sideways measurement of ojas. And so what can we do about this? And so I went back to school and conducted a study. That's what I got my doctorate in, is in sexology. Whenever I give talks from stages, I go, best doctorate ever, and people always go, sexology, what is that? And I say I'm the mother of functional sexology. Like I'm the one that invented this whole way of being in functional medicine with this concept of sexology. So I call myself the mother Fokker. Because I'm like Mrs. Fokker and Meet the Parents.
Excellent, yes.
Yeah, and my husband's just like him, and it's really funny. And so what I say is like, this is looking for the root cause of your flow. Like what's blocking your flow? And we want to find and fix that. And that's not going to be done through hormones. Like sometimes hormones are important and necessary to fill your bucket back up, but what put the hole in the bottom of the bucket in the first place? What's going on there? Right. And so that's really, the HURT study, Healing Unresolved Trauma study, was done because of this question I was asking. And what I discovered is that the reason why trauma causes pain, like the reason why it causes low libido, and if we come back to the Ayurvedic concept of 5 layers of us, we've got our physical structure, our energy body, our emotional, mental, and spiritual, right? Each one of those layers actually has its own consciousness, just like every cell in our body has its own consciousness. And it's informed by all the others. And in fact, your emotional layer is connected to your physical layer through the energy body, which is called the pranamaya kosha in this framework. And that contains your nervous system and your chakra system. So when I started thinking about that, I was like, wow, we have 72,000 little chakras in our body where nerves cross, the acupuncture points in the body. And it's out here that really puts us in connection to our emotional body. So I started asking this question, like, so what is the bridge between those two bodies? Like, is there something that connects us? So I started asking women this question in the HURT study. And what I discovered came into being as the HURT model. And the way it works is we first have our first trauma. And now I'm going to talk about lowercase t trauma too, because every child has trauma. There's not a human that hasn't been traumatized. We actually live in a culture of trauma. The very culture that actually pushes us to want more, to be productive, to be achievement oriented, that's like a predatory culture. So we're all steeping in this culture with the tea bag that's labeled trauma, right? So even if you haven't had sexual abuse, thank goodness, that you haven't. When you have an experience of being rejected from your tribe, and every child has this, and it could be like failing your first test, not getting picked for a team, or doing poorly on a team, or, missing a word in the spelling bee challenge. It doesn't matter what it is. I remember the rope and the presidential challenge in PE. That was always traumatic for me. So, it's like those kinds of things can be traumas, right? And what's going to happen is because we don't have a fully developed brain in childhood, we don't have this prefrontal cortex that's fully on board yet. That's our adult executive function. It doesn't come online until we're 26 years old. So as you're young and you're experiencing these first experiences that are felt as traumatic, Okay. Because biologically, we're wired. If you feel rejection or betrayal of any kind, it's like you've been put on the outside of the firelight circle and the saber-toothed tiger can eat you. So we're programmed to feel that as traumatic. Then you're going to have a fight, flight, or freeze response to that event, whatever it is. And like I said, it doesn't have to be domestic violence. It can just be failing a test, okay? And I don't mean to say just. I remember doing therapy on somebody whose biggest trauma was wearing hand-me-downs her whole life. She was the third of 3 girls, and she never had anything new. And that was a huge trauma for her, you know? Because this is why. The fight, flight, or freeze sets up a habituated response in the nervous system. Remember, the nervous system connects your emotions to your physical body. And we feel usually freeze when we're children because we're powerless. We're supposed to be. Like, we're little humans trying to figure out how to be big humans in a world dominated by big humans. So we're being told, this is good, this is bad. You're bad, you're good. This is right, this is wrong. It's very black and white. So we'll have that first fight, flight, or freeze response. It gets wired into the nervous system. It's like you have a button now that has just been wired. And then you attach a meaning to the button. You label it. So I always use myself as an example because I have a very clear-cut story you can follow, right? So in 5th grade, the intercom would go off. I'd get sent to the vice principal's office. I was being told that this event was happening because I was a bad kid. I was like one of 2 white kids in an all-black school too. So I was white trash, bad kid. And so the meaning that I made up is that adults can't be trusted. And the belief that I structured around that meaning was that I have to be perfect to even survive, not to be loved or respected or worthwhile, but actually to live. I had to be perfect, right? And then, so then that will create, and this is how it goes, meaning, belief, and then behavior. You have an adaptive behavior response that will attach to that belief and meaning. So mine was to be a perfectionist. And I was really, really good at being a perfectionist until I got sick at age 30, right? All my marathon times were always better than the last one. When I ran my first marathon, I qualified for Boston. You know, I was always at the top of my class. I always graduated as, you know, with 4.0. Like, I drove myself. I was my own competitor, right? So I tried to be the perfect mom, perfect wife, perfect, you know, it's not a sustainable framework of living a life. And so rheumatoid arthritis was this big, like, timeout, you know, you're not going to live doing this. And it gave me this beautiful opportunity to have to go back and re-examine my meaning, my belief, and my behavior. So that's the way the hurt model is broken up. In solving the autoimmune puzzle, I have this all written out. So now you have 2 choices in adulthood. Someone will come along and push your button. So for me, if I have to be perfect to survive, then that's going to be not good enough, right? Not fast enough, not smart enough, not whatever it is. It's easy to push. It'll trigger. Wah! And then in the nervous system, that will activate. Now remember that pain is this, right? It's the nervous system getting jangled. So and then that can create that cortisol that gets released from the adrenal glands when the brain says, we're in trouble, we're not perfect, oh no, can't survive, right? Then this biochemistry gets sent down to the rest of the body to tell it what to do. So the adrenal glands will let go of cortisol, put that out there so I can fight or I can flee. And that's going to, over time, break down the gut wall and my intestinal tract. It's going to create leaky gut. And now foods that I eat are going to make their way through those broken cells. And now my immune system, which is very wise in its wiring, it's supposed to attack anything that's not me. So if it sees broccoli, not just gluten, not just dairy, not just sugar, soy, or corn, or some of the things that we think about as kind of the top 7, like blueberries and coconut oil, if you eat a lot of those will show up too, and your immune system will attack them. And so that's actually not supposed to go that way, because we're not supposed to have a permeable gut wall like that. So that then happens, and that creates a whole state of inflammation. So you're going to hold, the 10 pounds of extra water I had when I woke up that morning is now mashing in those compartments against those nerves that are already jangled. And now you've got pain, big pain. But there's all this stuff going on underneath it, It's not just about like, oh, I'm deficient in ibuprofen or I need methotrexate, that's not it. There's all this stuff happening about how I'm perceiving my world. So I always tell people you have to know how you're perceiving your world if you're going to get your pain to relax. So in the hurt model, you have this one circle that has willingness to self-confront, willingness to go in and go, okay, how am I creating this? Not fault finding, not blaming, not shaming, but what's going on here that every time something happens, I'm present. Wherever I go, there I am, right? That there's nothing outside of me that I can blame here. So when you're willing to do that and go in and self-confront, then there's a whole series of things that can happen that can actually disrupt and even take the wires away from the button that you created when you were a child. Or you can go over here and do what we call maladaptive memory looping, where you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And the more that happens, the more ruminating on your pain of emotional stuff, the more you're going to have inflammation, the more leaky gut, the more immune response. You're just going to get sicker, sicker, and sicker. And so those two options, then it's like one shift and you can change the trajectory of where you're going, right? We know that. You change your compass by just a little bit, and then now your destination is different. So on the hurt model, it says you change one thing, you're actually going to start disrupting the cycle.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, I love it. You've touched on so many different things, and I'm hoping people watching right now are getting a lot out of it, whether you struggle with an autoimmune disease or some other kind of chronic pain. My understanding is that stress of any kind can create all sorts of different chronic pain. Is that something that you agree with?
So let's loop that in, because stress, this is so interesting, because you know how I talked about capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma. I was mapping brains in my study. I was like looking at fMRI scans and PET scans of brains. And what I discovered, and this was so fascinating to me, it was like one of those eurekas. No one had ever seen this before, because no one had been looking for female sexual desire in this way. So I looked at all these PET scans, and what I saw was, oh my gosh, the part of the brain that lights up in an MRI that is responsible for PTSD. So someone with PTSD, that part of the brain will light up is the part of the brain that's responsible for female sexual desire.
Wow.
That's where your libido goes, right? So if you're a zebra being chased by a lion and you think you're about to get eaten, that zebra knows it's not safe to reproduce right now or go to the bathroom. So everything that's responsible for digestion, proper digestion of emotions too, as well as feelings, beliefs, experiences, and memories, but also your food, is going to shut down, because you're going to have this narrowed scope of survival only. Mm-hmm. Now, what was really interesting to me, and again, it was like this brand new, I had never seen anyone make this discovery, is this research team saw that the same exact brain changes that happen with PTSD, which is a shrinkage of the prefrontal cortex, the adult executive function brain that decides who you're going to hang out with, how you're going to spend your money, what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, if you're going to go to sleep, like all of those adult things, right? That part shrinks. And then the part behind here, the limbic system, reptilian brain, particularly the right side of the amygdala, grows in volume. And so now our radar's up, like, am I safe? Can I trust you? What's going on? Someone's going to hurt me, right? So this radar is very high, vibrating really high. And as your mind goes with that, so goes your immune system. It also starts vibrating very high. Then your nervous system is activated into this like high alert all the time. Now, what was really interesting is this one research group led by Mole actually found that when people fill out a perceived stress scale index that reports that they feel stressed all the time or overwhelmed, and there's not a patient that I ever see that doesn't say they're overwhelmed, that causes the exact same brain changes, shrinkage in the prefrontal cortex and growth in the amygdala, and absolutely tense, on fire, activated nervous system, which again, this is connected to your emotional self, and that connects to your physical self. So now you're going to have not only stress that causes emotional pain and overwhelm and upset, but also a physical response that follows.
Oh, wow. There's so many like interesting connections that you've,
Yeah.
brought to my awareness today for sure. And I'm sure others watching the same, libido, trauma, right? All of these things, physical wellness, chronic pain, just the more average overwhelm that so many of us experience. I hate to say it's average, but it seems to be like so common these days that right? Like so many
It
people
makes
talk
you
about it.
sick as if you had sexual abuse. I want you to
Oh,
get that. Like
that's
that is what I rocked back on my heels and went, oh my gosh.
mm,
Oh my gosh. Right?
right. Oh,
Yeah. That's
I
why
just
I
get
say
the
we're a culture
chills.
of trauma,
Mm,
because it's kind of forming that overwhelm all the time. The
right.
expectations actually we place on ourselves. It's not the culture's fault because we buy into it that
Mm,
we have to have our kids in a million things, that we have
right.
to have this, we have to have that, and it's like this constant expansion, have to have more. And
Mm,
actually
mm,
that's not true,
right.
and it causes a lot of overwhelm.
Mhm. So for, since we're running a little low on time, I want to make sure like, right, what's the big take home for people who are watching right now, obviously, because they are struggling with chronic pain or they have someone in their family or friends that are, and like, what's the first step that they can start taking to resolve this, to get on a healing journey, all of those kind of questions.
I'm going to say two things. And one is that I know that everything I've presented is a lot. It's a lot. And, it's a lot to digest. And so in my book, Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, there are worksheets that actually put it together and you can digest it at your own pace. So I'm going to say that. But in terms of like first step, I always tell people, just like if you were trying to lose weight and you were in a weight loss program, you would be asked to keep probably a food diary. I always ask you to keep an eye for about 24 hours of just watching your language. Like keep a language diary. And
Mm,
I don't mean shit damn in hell. I'm talking about like the language that you use to speak to yourself. Is
yep.
it kind? Is it compassionate? I have a whole nother hour I could talk about with the culture of narcissism we live in now. Like the statistics are showing that narcissistic personality diagnoses are going up and up and up and up and up. And it's part of this trauma of our culture. And that, the self-esteem curriculum that we've put in the school system for so many years is actually damaging our kids. That you get to have a trophy just because you show
Mm,
up, and then our kids go away and then they're like, what? Life doesn't just give me a
mm,
trophy, and they're having trouble. And there's a suicide rate that's really high now in millennials because of it. And so the self-compassion piece that we're never taught, and we're just not taught this in our culture. That's the piece, right? Is to really watch your language and start to really treat yourself with compassion and love and honor and respect. And even your pain is a teacher. It's something that's there to give you information. It's just a data point, and it's your body trying to talk to you. So it's like having compassion for this beautiful body and the intelligence that it has and the consciousness that it has, and checking in and creating what I call a collaborative relationship with your systems rather than a combative one.
mm,
Not trying to kill your pain or dull it or numb it or band-aid it, but actually just dropping into a dialogue and a conversation with it, which again isn't a normal kind of a verbiage or language we use in our culture. So it's just tracking that for like 24 hours. How do you speak to yourself? How often do you shit on yourself? What's
mm.
happening in there?
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. So hopefully everyone watching can, right, if they take away nothing else, start doing that in your life and see if it makes a difference for you. So I would love it if you chat about a couple of buttons we have below this video, which link over to a gift you have as well as an offer. So what are these?
So the 21-day quick start guide is the gift, and it probably doesn't sound like a gift because it's 21 emails that you get, but it is. And it's 21 emails that actually link into I'm one of the busiest people I know. And I don't consider myself overwhelmed. I actually just love the fact that I get to live my life purpose. So it's ways of being able to adjust each of those 5 layers of yourself with simple things. Like I can't do hard things. I can't do complicated, time consuming things. And so there are things that I've learned that are tiny little adjustments that you can do to detox all 5 of your layers and bring them into what I call coherence, right? So then you're in this collaborative relationship. Now the gift that's going a little further. It's called You Unbroken. And it's a lot of people are afraid of therapy, or they've had bad experiences with therapy. And I teach you how to find the right kind of therapy and a good therapist for yourself if you need it. I call it borrowing a brain. So You Unbroken is actually trauma healing that you can do from your own computer. And I designed it to increase your resilience, your coping, so that your nervous system can calm down and know that you're safe, right? So it's all this, it's skill building. And then there are hard stops in it that say, if you can't do this, then you might need to borrow a brain. And here's how to do that. So it's really great because you get to be in charge of your own healing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Keesha, and everyone. I highly recommend you take a look at Keesha's work, get signed up for that 21 days of gifts. See, they are gifts, right? Every day is a gift, and take it further with Keesha if you want to. Are there any last insights, anything else you feel like we've left out before we wrap up?
Well, we'll circle back to libido. And one of the things I always end my functional sexology talks with is what's in your head goes to your bed. So, that it's really important to get underneath what's happening here as far as your perceptions, because it shows up in bed like a fortune cookie.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for everything you do and for sharing your amazing story and all the work that you do in the world, Keesha. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for showing up for yourself today. That's ultimately the number one step, is that you're here and you're watching, and you're listening and taking that step in your health today. So we will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.